It's time for another episode of Off the Record, On the Rocks. Join Michael Toner and Ankarino Lara and break down the latest news on all things Web3, AI, Metaverse, and crypto, filtering out noise and connecting dots as we pour ourselves into the future.
Welcome back to another Off the Record, On the Rocks with my good friend, Mr. Apple Vision Pro, Bitcoin, Ankarino Lara. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Michael. Look at, by the way, I can see into your future. In
So
2 days from now, I think you're going to need to sell some Bitcoin.
Just like we drew it up, we've got so much to talk about. We've got a lot to get to. My question would be, have you, or should we try now for you to log into Riverside through Apple Vision Pro? Like, sign in as a third guest, like boot it up, go to the browser, load it up, and like, can you join as your persona? Can you join as your digital twin simultaneously?
It's possible, but I give it a try. I was actually, the truth is I probably spent, over the period of a full weekend, 4 days, a couple hours here and there, probably 2 nights, because there is canned content, right? You can get, and when you go do the demo at the Apple Store, you sit there for 30 to 45 minutes, and they really do step you through everything, right? So you start to become comfortable with this notion that there's just one behavior, which is tapping your fingers. And that can happen anywhere, like down by your leg, because the cameras are kind of radiating. So you don't have to like have your head in front of you and say, I want that. So you can kind of just do this. But then when you look at windows, which are, as you say, the spatial computing, which is really the kind of revolutionary thing, the windows you can just sort of place all around in space. So as you walk around your house, like we were talking about last episode, and you scan your surroundings, because it has a pass-through, you don't want to bump into stuff, then you can place, let's say, a browser window over by my own window, like a real window, and have that open up a weather app, and I can be like, oh, what's the weather like in Chicago? And it's as if you're looking through like a hotel window into Chicago.
Check the weather by looking out a window?
Right?
How novel.
And then you're like, okay, well now let's go to Apple's own category of apps, which are VisionPro enabled and which are or are 3D, like if they're assets like video content. And so just like the start of the first iPad, if you remember going back to the first iPad, we don't have to go back to the first phone, because the first phone didn't even have an app store, right? We talked about that. It was like another almost year before that occurred. So when you talk about the iPad, what was it that got people just so amazed when they talked about the auto magically, that word got invented? Well, it was, one of my favorites was called Star Walk. You remember this app where you'd hold up your iPad and kind of look to the heavens, and it would show you constellations, and you kind of couldn't really believe just the AR of that. So Star Walk, everyone's favorite app, has a Vision Pro upgrade where you can strap these babies on, sit in
look at the stars
like a planetarium and look at the stars. And I was like, okay, that's fun. What's next? All right, let's go to Apple's 3D movies. What do we got? Pirates of the Caribbean 6. Okay, it's pretty nice. It's got Javier Bardem as like the weird ink guy. It's fine. How about Super Mario Brothers? It's animated. How about, and then I can list off probably 20 or 30 more animated things. And there's really only one movie that isn't animated, that isn't Pirates, which is Rogue One from Star Wars, which was done in all the 3D layers. So you can really put it on and kind of have this immersive experience. But beyond that,
so many questions for you.
Beyond that, the immersive experiences really are you sitting and becoming isolated and feeling like you're in an environment that can be like a concert hall, or it could be, and they tout like Joshua Tree, or, Mount Hood, or just places where you would go to be remote. And they do a really good job of making it so you look around, you can hear the water and the little birds, and then you say, okay, now I'd like to watch something, and then that's something you sort of put right in front of you, and you have this mechanic of holding the frame and moving it forward and backward. And one of the fun little things, I know it's an Easter egg, or it's not really core to the experience, but when you place a frame, a window, whether it's going to show you a web browser or an app or a video or whatever, before it takes it to immersive, you can kind of move it around and place it just so you want to get right up close and be staring at it like this, you can. If you want to slide it back so it goes to the back wall or outside, it's really far away so it looks really big, you can do all that. And you do that by pinching and holding the window bottom and kind of moving it around. And as you do, you see a shadow of that giant window sliding over your desk and then over your floor or over the rocks outside of Mount Hood or whatever. So it really does feel 3D. But again, after watching part of Rogue One, after watching part of Super Mario Brothers, after watching a pretty cool, like, bespoke IMAX kind of, I don't want to spoil it, but it's like a really cool mountain climbing kind of interview, which even takes you, to that. If you don't like heights, like, don't do it because you're looking down, just straight down, El Capitan or whatever. And after you do all that, then you say, okay, your head kind of feels a little bit heavy because these things weigh a pretty good amount, So your head feels a little heavy. You're like, okay, what else can I do? There must be games, right? There must be some cool games. And what are some games that you remember from the old days? Well, I don't know. How about Jetpack Joyride? You have all these kind of old favorites. How about a little Fruit Ninja?
How is the Fruit Ninja?
I mean, it's not great.
Okay.
I hate to say it. But the cool thing about these environments that they're showing you is the immersiveness. So it'll tell
what's
you,
possible.
Hey, be careful where you walk in your room because we're going to go full immersive. Like, not just half, but full. And that's like, for example, Jetpack Joyride. So you turn it on, and then the entire room that you're in turns into one of those weird cartoon rooms of Jetpack Joyride. And there's like fun little things to interact with that make sounds and squeak and squeal, kid stuff. And you put it on, and you're playing it, but you're playing it on a screen floating in your room. Like, you're not exactly in the experience. So what we're seeing is the experience today is isolating you, giving you a display, and playing with the display. But what we haven't really seen is, I put this on, now I'm on Mount Hood or the moon, and now I'm going to start wandering around and explore stuff kind of in my real digital world. So no apps that map your environment yet, and then like skin it to give you some kind of an experience.
It's coming.
It's coming soon, but to the tune of almost $4,000. It's hard to say that I have the need for a personal movie theater at this point in my life.
I have so many questions, but that is awesome way to kick it off. Even as you were describing, like, watching the movies, like, it immediately felt isolating. Like, when I heard you describe that, it wasn't like I went to the movies with anybody. It was like, I'm picturing you watching this movie, and I know it's just you. So I can sense that the isolating nature of the device, the not seeing the immersive shared experiences, that metaverse concept of being in a shared space simultaneously in this digital layer. That I can see why not just you, but a lot of people. I mean, Robert Scoble has a Twitter thread going of everybody who is taking it back.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Returning it. And it's not just you who are coming to this realization after everybody's kind of a full week in. They've gone through maybe a couple weekend cycles now, and perhaps it hasn't infiltrated its way into your day to day. Maybe you've gone a few days where you felt like you had seen everything, and until those use cases, I could see that there's still some work to do to really get into that immersive shared experiences where it's not isolating, and in fact, it is more of a social component.
And to that point, I mean, if these had come out 2 years ago and sort of coincidentally timed the release with COVID, you would see how they would just move product like crazy, because it was a time when people were already isolating and sheltering in place. But it was a time when people wanted to isolate and for real kind of transport themselves, right? And there was tons of content that was coming too. And who knows what would have been, more immersive and what wouldn't be. So just as like a practical matter, at this point in our life, with jobs and children and family and the ending of winter and the starting of spring, which in Los Angeles is, in our world, multiple family birthday parties, relatives flying in next weekend, the weekend after. You have a President's Weekend. We're coming into the spring break. We're coming into all these things which are going to make it so that I won't be alone in my house for any period of time at all. And so after kind of throwing it on the second night and saying, okay, well, maybe I should, what other apps are here? And you're like, oh, wow, I missed it. HBO Max's app is here. Oh, thank God. And so then you go into HBO and you're like, well, I kind of already have seen all my HBO stuff. So maybe I'll just throw on whatever movie's playing right now. And it says, oh, there's an immersive environment brought to you by HBO. I can watch my movie. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's fun. It's different. What's the immersive environment? And it just says, the Iron Throne Room brought to you by Game of Thrones. And I'm like, okay, so now
I'm watching this in a sponsored room.
Yeah, I'm putting on like a serialized TV show that's about, cops. And then I'm in this really dark, really menacing environment where there's this huge throne of swords just over to the side and like braziers and sconces flickering with fire. And I'm like, well, that's pretty neat. I guess if I wanted to watch Game of Thrones right now, this would be a fun place to do it. So instead I say, I'll just go back to Apple. I'll just go to where? The Joshua Tree? No, maybe the moon. I'll go to the moon and then I'll watch my sci-fi movie. So like it has these themed areas, kind of, sort of, but again, look, I go to the movies, right? We live in LA. We have an AMC movie pass. I love going to the theater. I love getting a popcorn, getting a beer, a hot dog, a Coke, whatever, and sitting there and watching. And one of the things I did was I popped some popcorn. I got my drink and sat there. And now I'm isolated. So now my feet are up. And now I'm nervous because I can't see anything. So now I'm sitting there totally isolated. My feet are up. And I'm like, oh, that's right. I put the popcorn to the right of my leg. And I put the drink to my left of my leg. So now I'm leaning. I don't want to lift the goggles up and take the whole thing out. So then I decide, okay, well, I'm going to lean forward and I'm going to turn off my phone ringer. I'm going to lean forward and I'm just going to feel around the table a little bit. And then I feel and I bump it. Okay, there's the popcorn. Okay, I got the popcorn. I put that on my lap and now I'm holding that. And I'm like, okay, now I'm going to reach down and maybe pull my legs off just for a sec. Oh, that's my laptop there. Hang on. Okay, I got the, okay. And I'm like, oh, this is perfect. I know where that is. I'll put that back. So I get the popcorn. I have a few bites of popcorn. It's good. And then I go to get the drink and you put it up, but the goggles are so big that it goes dink. Kind of like dink at the edge of my drink to the front of the goggles. And I don't want to do it again for real because these are so delicate. Like I do not want to shatter them. But it kind of goes dink, and I'm like, oh. But I'm like, but it's an immersive room, so I don't have to stay straight. So now I'm going like this and having my drink as I'm now staring up and like watching, aliens or whatever. And I thought, well. And I'm almost spilling, and I can't see anything. So I'm like, okay, I gotta take these off for a second. You lift them up just a little, you can still hear it. And I'm like, oh, the table's over there. Okay, I'll slide over my drink back here and get the popcorn. And, okay, back down again. Oh, here we are. So it was just it's challenging. It's challenging to just relax. You actually are kind of in this, while you're isolated, it really prevents you from doing much of anything.
Interesting.
Whereas in a movie theater, you actually could be isolated and kind of still move around, look around, but it's dark. So there is this divide where, honestly, until the form factor starts getting down into this level, and it doesn't feel like you're weighing your head down. And again, the immersiveness is something that we can share somehow, as opposed to just me alone. That's sort of the missing component, is the do it with a friend. And then the last thing I'll say, I'm going to move on, is they do a really good job of making it really hard to show someone your VisionPro, because it's such a bespoke experience when you go in and they read your glasses, and you already know in the next iteration we're going to have digital prescriptions on lenses soon. Like the idea we're cutting polymer and plastic and glass anymore is ridiculous, right? It's going to be LEDs and they're changing all that. So just seeing all that set up is like, oh wow, these guys are going to make it perfect for my eyes and it's going to be great. But then if I take it off and put it on anybody else, it's like, hey, warning, you're not the Apple ID owner because it's reading your eyes.
Right.
And that person, while it's on, can just start buying things and doing stuff with your account.
Which is why they can't let them in.
You have to trust someone. And in order to trust them, you have to look up like this. It's a little awkward. Your eyes have to go roll up in your head to pull up the dashboard, which is a hiding little arrow in your top view. Open the dashboard up, go over to say guest account.
Wow.
Then tap for guest account, and then the guest account gives you that warning saying you must know who your guest is. They can buy all your stuff. They're going to violate your privacy, blah, 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 blah. They really kind of hit you with the EULA, the big end user, what's a EULA stand for? End user
legal agreement.
Legal agreement. Yeah. And then after you say, yes, okay, I get it. This is my friend, my wife, my kid, or whoever. I'm not just on the subway in New York being like, you want to try? Hitting somebody. But then it says, how long do you want the guest timer to run?
Wow.
So now I have to choose. It's like an Apple timer scroll, 5 minutes, 10, 15. Okay, here you go, honey. How long is Friends? 30 minutes? 30 minutes. And put it on your head. And then you're watching it, and they're in the guest mode and can't do anything but see the app you showed them And then once they're done, you can take it off and navigate it. So it's like very,
Wow.
it's not just an isolating experience with the product. It's isolating in the sense that like, yeah, I have
Can't
it,
even share
but
it.
I can't even share it. And that's why these influencers that are on, you talked about all the different people you watch these videos from. It's just them kind of doing awkward screen recordings of browsing around because anything that's playing content goes black for copyright violation. And anything they don't want you to be able to stream out to a video, they just won't. So you can't even really show what it looks like without having to be like, here, I'll show you where I put my packing list over my closet and the window of the weather in Chicago. But in so doing, I'm going to show you the entire layout of my house. So no one's going to do that, or I wouldn't do that. So anyway, my critical review. I love it, obviously, but we are months, if not at least another year in to like second. I know every single person returning it today or tomorrow, whatever, is going to be probably asked this amazing survey of questions. Because I feel like part of it is they know they're coming back and they just want data. They want to know what is it? What is it? So
I will say, of what you just shared, the thing that I am 100% certain of is that we will look back on that laundry list of little user experience things that you just described. The eyes up, the sharing, the timer, the blacking out for copyright, the only being able to watch one app, all the little teeny tiny little things. We will look back at some point in time, and it was all by design. Every one of those little friction points, as minute as it is a known friction point, perhaps with a solution. Not all of them. I'm not saying that they've got a way to solve all these problems, but of the ones that were purposefully not solved, of those little things, of the not being able to share it, of the locking it down, even that isolating feeling, even the you're not in the game, you're watching the game, all those little things that you said are by design, because as you unlock each of those doors, you go a layer deeper in. If I can't be in the game, then guess what? Today, breaking news, Apple now allows you inside the game as your extreme, it's a new app update. It's a software update, not a hardware update. The hardware can probably do it. The software limiting factor, this playbook, we know it. So I will say that we will look back on everything you just said, and at some point in time, we'll take a marker through every little checkpoint there, and we'll understand exactly why that was the starting point, why those were the foundational decisions made, because they will give us the iterative progress in version 2. So
it's a great point, because look, we know that it's a thoughtful product roadmap. I remember sitting with my brother-in-law, probably with the iPhone 4 or 5. I can't remember when it happened. And he's a designer and a tech guy. And we were at a barbecue lamenting that, like, how is it that with the proliferation of apps and the form factor and all these things on an iPhone, that there isn't a search? You can't search. And people forget, because search is now something we just assume has always been there. But search did not exist on the iPhone until at least halfway through the product cycle, because they had you sliding back along. You had to, remember, slide through pages and pages of apps and look for the icons and recognize them. And they helped drill in this idea that icons and browsing of icons is the most important thing to know right now. They don't give you everything all at once. If you were searching, well, then you'd realize there wasn't that much stuff, because you're searching a small amount of stuff. So for me, I feel like, well, they put these goggles on my head and then threw me into Jetpack Joyride as a first person, or whatever that future is going to be. I might end up defenestrating myself by accident, just jumping out my own window. Maybe it's so overwhelming as a behavior, I can't even process it. I need to slowly say, oh, goggles are on and I'm isolated. And what am I doing? Oh, right, I'm playing a game on a TV. Then some number of months or years go by, and they say, now that everyone's comfortable with tapping, zooming, pulling and pulling back, and not running into the walls in their house, okay, now let's put you into a more immersive thing. I can see needing to not go too far too fast. I agree with that. The one last point I would make, though, which is something that I at least did a little bit of, but if you have an iPhone 15 for all of those listeners who have a 15. Within your settings for camera, which is down at the bottom section of your media stuff, where it says here your TV and your Apple stuff, you click on camera, and there's a little hidden button that no one told me about until I was in there for my demo. But you can click on video settings and say, I would like to record for VisionPro for video. Right. So then you can do the 3D kind of cool video thing. Now, the other thing is that if you do any panorama photos, which I used to do a ton of, panorama photos become like 50 feet tall in your view and wrap a full 180 degrees. So if you ever did one of those rad shots at Disneyland, or you did the Grand Canyon, or just the swim meet, or whatever it is, you can really kind of get in and look really close. But the VisionPro video, while it's not 3D, it's like layered. It's pretty neat. And when it's people that you know, right? The demo they show you of kids at the birthday blowing out the candle, it's nice, but it isn't your family. So as soon as you get your family in there, you can already see the emotional connection. Like you say, the content, the software. As soon as you see that, you start to go, oh, maybe I should keep this thing because I have thousands and thousands of video of my kids. Then you realize, oh, but they weren't shot on the 15 yet. So I only have like 4 videos. So now I'd love a whole year of doing that. And then when I put these goggles on, it'll start going, hey, memories. Where were you on your birthday? What about this? And I'm swimming in it. So right now, a little early, a little dry. The hardware feels a little dry. It's not wet and sticky. Not sticky.
I will keep going on this because it is worth it. But the other thing you just said about video, we talked about this really early on at the very first keynote, or it was maybe the keynote right before they announced the product, because they were already talking about spatial video. And I remember saying to you that concept was so smart, that spatial video, like the moment you say that to your grandparent and they get it. Maybe they don't, really, they can't explain it back to you, but they're not going to question it, I guess is the one. It's like, it's a very comfortable term, and it's the closest product name. It's not even a product name. It's a feature. They call it spatial video. I wonder if even on the button, if it says or calls it spatial video. But to me, that is the Trojan horse for spatial computing, which is what you just described, which is I need all this content, just like the App Store. I need a bunch of apps. I need hundreds of thousands of apps before I turn on the search feature. I need millions, and you need hundreds of thousands of spatial videos in your camera roll to make doing the thing, a value. You need that search. I want to be able to search through, like, show me all the locations, right? And have this experience. And I could see that's where they're taking spatial video as the Trojan horse into. And
you're correct. I
don't have a 15, so I've never seen that screen.
Spatial video for Apple Vision Pro. Record spatial video with remarkable depth for viewing in the Photos app on Apple Vision Pro. Yeah. For best results, you must keep phone in a landscape orientation and maintain a stable hand while recording. The video will record at 30 frames per second at 1080p. 1 minute of spatial video is approximately 130 megabytes. And then, of course, they have other things like that. Once you go into there, you realize, there's photo capture at different variables. You can do pro raw resolution control for maximum res out of SLRs. There's all kinds of weird new settings that are being dropped in. And then, as you said, they taught us spatial audio. And truth is, these goggles don't work unless they're spatial audio. And one of the other kind of shocking things is, as you're wearing them and you're listening to it, you like to go to your ear to say, I should drown the sound out. And you go touch your ear and you realize, wait a second, I'm not even wearing my AirPods. They're that good. They have those little like vibrating metal things on your temple that gives you the in-ear audio without even wearing your pods. So as I thought, having to go in there, people would have to come out with the keyboard and the pods and the thing. You literally come out with just the box, weighs a ton, and you feel like you just spent too much money. And as you're going to the car, you're like, I hope no one notices my special. There's a special bag and a special box. Like the bag is a perfect
square,
a perfect kind of rectangle, because the box itself is like. It's like you're buying the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Collector's Edition, whatever set with the tower.
Giant.
It's so heavy. and you open it up and it's beautiful and everything else. But again, you get through it in a few hours and you think, oh man, how much longer am I going to have to wait for the future?
Well, I think we can try to wrap it up, although we keep going. But I think the early adopters, the folks, the creators, the developers, the XR community, the brands that have 3D and AR assets, the studios that are filming now in spatial video, the Disney experiences, the Unreal Engine games that are being built. Those are the content pieces that will complete the puzzle. And I think Apple, in fact, again, I think we'll look back on this in a couple of years and say they actually did a pretty damn good job of seeding the experience and the content that you were able to have, both with the in-store, the kind of guided tour, maybe it lasted about 7 days worth of experiences that you were able to have. That's a lot of good seeding of what's possible and how it works. And we'll have more to come on that. But yeah, good luck taking it back. I can't wait to hear about the survey, the exit survey, and hopefully they don't give you any
Yeah, I'll text
guff.
you if I end up getting mugged between my car and the Apple Store. But that, as a segue, I asked a couple of the pointed questions on my way out, which of course Apple's very good about not revealing any information to any of their employees. But I was even with my business partners who were special employees there, and they were convinced that there would be some Apple halftime something, because Apple has the Apple Music halftime show, the Super Bowl, Usher performing, all his pals. Nothing in the moment, but I'm sure that you could probably see the Usher 3D the Super Bowl thing later in the gallery. And then the second thing was, hey, I want to start transacting on the blockchain using these. Is there any information you guys have about cryptocurrency and how microtransactions are going to work and all that stuff? And all they had was just hey, we're here, more is coming soon, but don't know anything yet. So I thought interesting that, I guess you can't introduce too many things at once. You really do got to take it slow because people are learning, right? This is for real the end of the mouse and the keyboard as physical peripherals. It's the end of earpods. Like,
Yeah.
you just don't need all the extra wearables. You don't need a laptop. You don't need a watch. You don't need anything. You just need the lenses. So as we think about cryptocurrency, we think about trends. The one that caught my eye, if I might just do a segue, was the really low cost alternatives to the VisionPro that are starting to proliferate. And you sent me one that, like, we talked about one, the X Real,
The X Real
the
glasses,
Chinese
yeah.
one, which was going to be, I want to say, $700 or $800, and then there was a new one. It was like $300. Did you see that?
I've seen these glasses. Yeah, they're
So I'm not going to
real
say
sleek.
they're competitors to the Vision Pro, because I'm sure they don't do nearly as much, or Apple would not tell you they do. But the question is, what is the minimum viable product for goggles or lenses? Do these companies that have a $350 price tag from Brilliant Labs, do they have something that is fun, interesting, usable? I would argue yes. In a world where people can't drop a card and pay $4,000, maybe there is an opportunity for a 300, 400, 500, let's call them a knockoff or a competitor, a chaser. But do they have a couple apps? Do they give you a pseudo isolating video experience? Is there any kind of a spatial anything? Even if it's not called spatial computing, if it's kind of good enough, maybe it's going to take a little of the wind out of Apple's sails as they really try to ramp up their offering. I don't know if you have any thoughts on, like, would you ever even go down market or even consider it?
I mean, I've got the MetaQuest 3, and I think this is the conversation I've been having here in the house over the past couple of weeks of talking myself out of buying the Apple Vision Pro, which is I can't think of anything that the Apple Vision Pro can do today, with the exception of spatial video, although Meta announced that they are going to now support the spatial video format inside of MetaQuest. So again, when you're getting to the software and content creation, Apple's in a kind of a sticky spot there, because you can't put a walled garden around that. They kind of are trying to, I think, a little bit with this unique format, or maybe trying to catch the competitors off guard. But at the end of the day, if it can play as a 2D video, then it can be ported to any other screen. Anyway, I think I wouldn't go too far downstream. I think I am more interested in the augmented reality side of this thing. At the end of the day, I think that's how you solve that isolating factor when you're fully immersed in the environment. Even if the people in that environment are digital people that you're interacting with, I think that the real unlock will be when I can be both in the room with real people watching a movie and seeing my digital counterparts simultaneously. That blended reality where I could be actually having a social interaction, which is, I think, where they were going with even the face on the front of the goggles. We keep coming back to this, but that's where I see clear glasses. Yes, much smaller form factor. Clear glasses being that I am looking through it. You are actually looking at my eyes. It's just I am now able to augment what I'm seeing. It also makes me want to get I never had the Ray-Bans, but the Meta
TikTok Ray-Bans or the Meta?
Yeah, I mean, well, either them. Yeah, the lenses, the TikTok lenses, but Meta had the partnership with Ray-Bans with just the cameras in them. And I think that there's something there too about filming that first person view, in terms of content creation, in terms of, the experience, as you were saying, like what would make me want to go get a different pair of glasses. I don't know. That's a real cool thing. If I can actually wear the glasses and I could go, film a day at the theme park and capture the memories without having to think about it. Again, capture the memories without having to think about it. Why? Because I want to be able to play them back later. But right now, I don't want to be wearing those goggles. It's an interesting.
Yeah, we're in the transition, right? We're in the transition period. There's a period, and I'm sure there's a word for this in like standard product marketing and economics of there's a point at which the product goes from the nice to have or the consideration to the must have. And there was it took years, right, before effectively every single phone manufacturer acquiesced and said, oh, the form factor for the future phone is going to be something that looks like this, a rectangle that you can touch. And then everyone followed suit. You can talk about this in terms of, you find something that works really, really well, and everyone will ape it, and they'll figure out a lower cost way, and maybe it has less features. I mean, I remember those old original Google phones and the original Microsoft phones. The touch screen was super unresponsive, whereas the Apple was very smooth. None of them had the like physics where you bounce one of the digital like things and it kind of hits the bottom and comes up. That was patented at one point. Sooner or later, they finally all catch up. But even before they caught up, when the 2008 and 9, when that iPhone came out, not everyone had it until easily 2012, 13. The rise of social, and what was it that brought it to the mainstream? It was the software that was called social media networks. It was the reason to be somewhere in the world geotagged and doing something with a phone, namely photos and videos. Without that, the iPhone stayed as a really expensive relic. Right.
And maybe this was you giving me the layup with the glasses and these Chinese or Korean manufacturers of these devices, because if they're able to provide an on-chain transaction, if I can log into my MetaMask wallet via the glasses, all of a sudden now there is a much different use case. But then you also went down this social media path of like what made these apps stand out when they all became social networks. I'm blending a bunch of things here, but one of the things that stood out to me on the Super Bowl weekend was Twitter announcing that they were going to allow MGM bets on Twitter. You're now going to be able to bet in real time on Twitter. Take everything I just described. If I'm watching the game with my glasses, I got my Twitter pulled up, I'm watching the game, and now I'm placing real-time bets. Now the hardware didn't matter. I'm able to facilitate watching a video, and I'm able to facilitate real-time betting using existing infrastructure, using the existing YouTube video player, and now Twitter integrating payments. I just need the hardware to let me do that transaction in cryptocurrency. All the while, Joe Biden tweeting out, just like we drew it up. To me, there are so many angles to take from this in terms of the sheer conspiracy theory about the NFL being rigged, about Taylor Swift's involvement with the game being rigged and her dating the star player. as he was out there stumping for Pfizer and COVID-19 shots. Like, you can go down some rabbit holes here. I don't know where to take that other than, yes, big game at the Super Bowl. And I think it all comes back around to crypto's here. The president is tweeting out laser eyes, and the metaverse is now, we are transitioning. We are in that transitionary period. So take that. Take that.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, I mean, with the president not only tweets laser eyes, and for those who are listening who haven't seen this, it's when you modify a profile photo or just a photo and make it look like your eyes are glowing, usually a red or a blue, and sometimes even shooting lasers out of it like Superman, which is supposed to mean that you are all in on digital, on crypto. It's supposed to mean you are, I mean, at one point it was even a Bitcoin maxi kind of a thing, right? It was a Bitcoin eyes. But the president has now, I want to say this is the second time, right, that he's done a laser eyes picture, but then said it was not about crypto. Like, his team made some note to say, like, oh, it was referencing this other thing. The Chiefs, that's what they claimed. It was like a reference to the Super Bowl. Yeah, but I mean, like you said, it's everything about it is so weird. It's just steering into so many things, and yeah, it's really hard to bet against Team Taylor. I mean, people call them the Swifties. Like they call the team the Swifties. I mean, people I know around LA who aren't, they don't have love for Kansas or whatever. It's like, oh, Team Swiftie? Oh yeah, the fix is in. They're going to win. I'm like, come on. My family was born and raised in San Francisco. I want to believe that it's not completely corrupt. But then you watch the game and you're like, man, there's some funny decisions being made here in this game. It kind of all led right to the Vegas money line, like exactly a 3-point win kind of thing. And did really you see the Jack Dorsey sitting in the box with Jay-Z wearing the Satoshi shirt? Did you see? I did not see that, no. So they pan over to Jay-Z, and you've got Jack Dorsey sitting there, straight up Satoshi, full beard. And I was like, why is Jack Dorsey hanging out with Jay-Z? Oh, yeah, that's right. He bought Tidal. What is Tidal all about? Ownership for the artists. So the Web3 vibes coming out of the Super Bowl from a whole bunch of different angles. I think if you take Taylor Swift angle and owning her music, I think if you take what I just described in terms of Jay-Z and you've got Satoshi right there on screen on Jack Dorsey, who we know famously from being the CEO of Twitter to running Square in the online payment system. So I think or Block, right? Or and Block, yes, excuse me. Block is the main company, but he's got and hanging off of it. And a crypto maxi for sure. So it was front and center for me. And then the Biden tweet just really put the cherry on top of like, this is really what's going on coming off the heels of Chinese New Year and markets pumping, the headlines, all over the place of Bitcoin passing 50K. I've seen a lot of the narrative around the spot Bitcoin ETFs and the inflows and outflows of those day by day. And finally, I guess whatever Grayscale was offing some of their original Bitcoin trusts into the ETF, and now they're acquiring more Bitcoin. It's like 12 and a half times more than inflows than there were outflows in the past 2 days. And so the demand is going up, the supply is going down, and therefore the price goes up. And that dynamic is playing out just like we drew it up. Just like we drew it up. That's awesome. Speaking of eyes, and maybe a laser eyes kind of analog is one maybe we can close on. But, we talk about killer apps for all these experiences, whether it's killer apps in Web3. When people hear the term killer app, again, I like to reference, some of the more famous ones from the days of yore, right? The reason why Microsoft was able to sell Xboxes to what was an already saturated hardware market for video games. This is rewinding out of the turn of the century. You already had the PlayStation, and it's, I want to say, coming third in a iteration, PlayStation 3. You had a Nintendo, who was, of course, always a player, and they were in the process of rolling out what would be called the GameCube. It was called Project Dolphin when it was secret. And then there was Sega, who were still making game systems. everyone thinks of them from the famous Genesis days, which is 16-bit, but they created the Dreamcast, which was actually a really incredible system, famous for its killer app, Soul Calibur, a 2-player 3D fighting game. So what would Xbox do? They had no lineup. In the last year leading up to it, they realized if we don't have a game that's going to move these gigantic Xboxes, we're never going to survive. So they went over to Bungie Studios and wholesale acquired them, famous because they make this new game called Halo, first-person shooter at the time, which was going to be not multiplayer at all, but which is going to be a first-person experience. And that moved the Xboxes. Video games, right? We know that pornography and video games moves markets. So as we go fast forward to all this gaming, well, who is aligning themselves? And I feel like that sweetest spot, and you found this one. We kept talking about WorldCoin and that project where they had these giant orbs. They were supposed to scan your irises, and that would somehow be allowed, would help you mint coins on their whatever blockchain. Sam Altman was involved from AI, ChatGPT. It was this weird thing, and you're like, we're going to have like a giant magic 8-ball sized thing on your desk that you're just going to be putting your face in to do stuff? Like, no. So of course everyone laughs and it goes away. But where do they land? Esports.
Yeah. Because
when you show up to the arena in Las Vegas and Taylor Swift and Post Malone are playing, and Satoshi, aka Dorsey, and Jay-Z are there, and all the best gamers are going to be playing the Madden NFL 2025, and hell, Travis Kelce's going to be there, and he'll be playing himself in the game against you or whatever. How am I going to know it's Michael Toner, the gamer, instead of, the guy we just flew in from wherever, the ringer? Well, because you're going to have to put your face up to this little egg, have it scan your eyeballs in front of all those people I just mentioned. And then when Travis and Taylor put their thumb up and say, he is who he says he is, well, now we're in the metaverse playing video games together. So there's still going to be a hardware gate, always. And yet we have so many hardware gates, we just don't have the software to keep us there. Not yet.
I love that we spent most of the time on Apple Vision Pro, a little bit of the time on Bitcoin, and even littler time on the gaming environment. But yes, esports, verification of identity, it is all about blockchain and ownership and how we're going to show up in these new digital worlds. We will leave it there, sir. We'll do it again next week.
Talk to you next week.
Likewise.
Take care.
That's all the time we have for this episode of Off the Record on the Rocks. Join us next week for more news on all things Web3. Check, please.